Mackie looked at herself. It was already 8 o'clock at night, and Jack still hadn't come home. And although it wasn't the first time, Mackie hoped that at least for her own daughter's birthday, he would be on time. It had been a long time since they had spoken heart to heart, and it seemed like there was nothing in common between them. They lived probably just so that the daughter wouldn't feel bad. However, now she was sadder than ever. The guests had already left, and Kirby kept asking her mother when her father would come. "Daughter, he will come in the evening, maybe at night. But he will certainly congratulate you. I'm sure of that. It's not every day that you turn 10. The birthday had been a success. Kirby only needed a congratulation from his father to be completely happy, since he had seen him very little lately. Everything changed in a moment when Jack was promoted at work. Before that, he was an ordinary person, working as a manager and always complaining about his boss, Clark. He said that his boss made a lot of money at his expense, and he didn't want to share. And one day, when he came home from work, he was shining like a samovar. Jack told his wife that at last, God had heard his prayers and he had been promoted at work. That moment could be considered the beginning of the end. Hacker began to spend twice as much time at work. If he used to come in at 5, now it could be at 8 or 10. Hacker himself said that it was normal, that there was a lot of work and that he had to work. Mackie had already washed all the dishes. Now he just sat and watched the clock hand slowly move forward in the next circle. "Kirby, did you do your homework?" "Birthday is birthday, but homework is not cancelled." "Yes, Mum, I did it a long time ago." "Well, then let's watch TV." Actually, Maggie had bought the present that the father was supposed to give his daughter a long time ago, because she knew perfectly well that he wouldn't even remember her birthday. Maggie and Kirby were sitting in front of the TV. The mother turned on her favorite cartoons. The woman didn't let go of the phone. She was still waiting for Jack to call her back, but the call never came. Then Maggie sent Kirby to bed. The girl left very sad. She wanted so badly for her father to congratulate her, but he again did not even have time to come. When Jack returned, Kirby had long since fallen asleep, and the man did not immediately remember that his daughter was turning 10 today. He quietly entered the hall, took off his shoes, and went to the kitchen. There, seeing the birthday cake on the table, he quickly realized that today had been a celebration. A few minutes later, Maggie appeared in the kitchen. She looked at her husband intently and waited for an explanation. "Where have you been? Our daughter waited for you all night. Where would she be?" "I was at work. You seem to be using your job as an excuse quite often lately. What do you mean? Are you lying to me?" "Maggie, please, I'm sick of your jealousy. I'm not jealous of you. Just that if you're hiding something, you'd better say it right away. I have nothing to tell. Nothing at all. And what about that lipstick I found in your car?" "That was because a friend took the car during lunch." Jack tried to excuse himself. "I don't believe you. You're making up all kinds of nonsense so as not to give yourself away." Hakan didn't say anything in response. He just turned around and went to the bedroom. Maggie stood in the kitchen crying silently for a long time. Lately, her relationship with her husband had deteriorated a lot. She could no longer remember when was the last time she had a sincere conversation with him. After being in the kitchen for about an hour, she went to the bedroom only after making sure that her husband was asleep. The next morning, when the daughter was still asleep, Maggie brought the gift, supposedly from her father, to her room. She put it on the table and left the room. Jacques, as if nothing had happened, quickly got ready and left for work. Maggie had been doing this trick with gifts for years. She watched Kirby get excited about the gift that her father was supposedly giving her. After Kirby told her mother how excited she was about the gift, they started getting ready. Kirby to go to school and Mackie to go to work. Mackie worked at a travel agency. Every day she sold tour packages, although the last time she had been to the sea was when she was a child. Many years ago, she had gone south with her parents. Maggie often thought they needed to go on family vacations, But her vacations never coincided with her husband's. In reality, though, Jack simply didn't want to go anywhere. He could have arranged his vacation to coincide with hers, but he considered it a pointless waste of money that he wouldn't agree to. Maggie, on the other hand, wanted to go and even thought of going alone with her daughter. Her workday passed in a flash. She talked enthusiastically to clients about different countries and didn't notice how the day went by. After work, she would pick up her daughter and they would go home. Sometimes, her daughter would get home long before her. Today, Maggie was on her way home. She thought that she had to do something with Jack, otherwise she wouldn't even say hello to him soon. She found it very difficult to get close to her own husband, when before everything had been completely different. Jacques and Maggie met 15 years ago. Their romance began in their student days. Maggie was already in her second year, and Jack was finishing college. They first met at a student party, to which everyone who wanted to attend was invited. A conversation arose between Maggie and Jack. And literally, after a few hours, Maggie realized that Jack was an excellent conversationalist. She was willing to chat with him all day. However, the party was coming to an end and soon everyone was asked to leave. Maggie lived on the other side of the city and Jack offered to accompany her. Of course, she did not refuse. They walked around the night city, talked about various topics and felt free. Hacker told her how he would soon get a good job, earn a lot of money, and have a big family. At the time, he seemed very sincere, and she believed him. However, after he walked her home, he disappeared and did not even ask for her number. For several weeks, Maggie remembered the funny guy she had spent that night with. She didn't know where he had gone or where to look for him. Only 2 weeks later, Maggie began to wonder what Jack was doing at a student party if he had already finished university. To be honest, Maggie hadn't expected to meet him anymore. But the second time they met was completely by chance in a shop. Jack quickly approached her and began to apologize for having disappeared for so long. This time, he asked for her number and promised to give her another equally fun ride. But she didn't expect anything, just like after the party. A couple of days later, Jake asked her out. They started talking a lot and spent weekends together. Maggie realized that she was starting to have feelings for him. She was afraid that those feelings wouldn't be reciprocated. But a few days later, Jack confessed his love for her. They started dating and 2 years later, they got married. The newlyweds lived in a rented apartment. Hacky worked hard, trying to make Maggie's life better. They loved each other and understood each other perfectly. And then Kirby was born and, to be honest, Jack adored her. Everything was going well until money problems started. Then, Jack got a job at the company where he is now a department head. Maggie remembered how every time Jack came home, he would complain about his boss. He said that he didn't know anything about people. However, as soon as the boss promoted Jack, he became a good person. Maggie came home and noticed that her husband was not home again. When her mother arrived, Kirby had already washed all the dishes and had even warmed up dinner. Maggie was always surprised that Kirby started helping around the house so early. And that night was similar to the previous one. They also sat with Kirby in front of the TV and then went to their rooms. However, today something happened that Maggie will never forget. Jacques came home after a short while. Today, he was cheerful, and it seemed like nothing could ruin his mood. Without saying anything, she went into the bedroom and began to gather her things. "Where are you going?" asked Maggie. "I'm leaving," said Jack quite calmly. "Where are you going?" "I don't understand anything. I want to live separately, and you stay here." "Naturally, we will stay here. If you haven't forgotten, this is my parents' apartment." Maggie looked intently at her husband, who was running around the room looking for something. "What are you looking for?" "I need my passport." "And what do you need the passport for? You don't seem to understand." I'm seriously leaving you. I fell in love with someone else. I want to file for divorce. Maggie did not immediately understand what Jack meant by leaving, and only now did the revelation come to her, which was like a bolt from the blue for her. She looked at her husband and thought it was another one of his jokes. Wait, don't go. Please tell me you were joking. No, Maggie, I wasn't joking. We've become complete strangers lately. What nonsense are you talking about? Everything was so good between us. Maggie started talking nonsense, even though she herself understood perfectly well that her family could no longer be saved. They continued to argue with her husband for a long time, and then, when the suitcases were packed, he, with a loud slam of the door, simply left somewhere. Maggie slipped out the door onto the floor. She couldn't believe that her husband could so easily give up on their daughter. He left without even saying goodbye to her. The woman sat in the hall for a long time, crying, thinking about life. The next morning, Kirby attacked her with questions. He really wanted to know where Dad was, and honestly, the woman didn't know what to answer. She didn't want to tell the girl that her father had fallen in love with someone else. So for now, she said that he had gone on a business trip. However, this business trip was prolonged, and Kirby began to suspect that his mother was simply lying to him. 2 weeks had passed, and Jack had not called or shown up. Maggie understood that he really was not coming back, and it was probably time to tell Kirby that his dad was gone, and gone for good. It was nighttime. They were sitting at the table. The woman did not understand for a long time how to start this conversation. Mum, do you want to tell me something? Yes, daughter. I just can't find the right words. This is about Dad, right? Kirby, understand. Your father and I decided. He fell in love with another woman and now lives with her. I already suspected it. Did you suspect it yourself? Yes, Mom. All this is similar to what happened in Elena's family when her mom and dad also divorced. But don't worry, I'm older now. I understand everything. You have the right to make your own decisions. Maggie looked at her daughter in surprise. She hadn't realized when the little girl had become so mature. Kirby, you surprise me. I'm talking to you, and I get the impression that you're not even 10 years old. Kirby smiled, then walked over and hugged her mother. She could see how hard it was for Maggie, and just a month later, the woman received a court summons. Her husband was asking for a divorce. At the trial, it was decided that Kirby would stay with her mother. It was there that Kirby saw her father for the last time. He paid child support on time, but he was hardly in the girl's life. Sometimes, she would just call. However, these conversations did not last as long as she would have liked. The days without her beloved husband passed slowly. Maggie always hoped that he would return, apologize, and that she would even forgive him. However, nothing happened. Sometimes, the woman saw photos that he posted on social networks with a young girl next to him. At such moments, Maggie was filled with anger. She hated him, but at the same time, she loved him. One day, after leaving work and arriving at the bus stop, Maggie was waiting for her bus. Today, for some reason, the bus was taking a long time to arrive. She didn't notice when a large black car pulled up beside her. Mackie, do you want a ride? A man said, rolling down his window. Mackie finally turned around and saw Clark, her husband's boss. She didn't recognize him right away, having only seen him a couple of times at company events. Clark, I'm so glad to see you. Maggie, get in the car, I'll take you. No, that's not right, plus it's awkward. Well, let's not argue. Get in the car, I'll take you. Maggie didn't argue any further, and soon she was sitting in the front seat of an expensive car. So, where do I take you? The woman quickly dictated an address, and they began to drive. All the way there, Clark talked about his job. He talked about how Jack was doing a great job in his new position. Excuse me, could you please not talk about him? What do you mean not? He's your husband. Well, you probably don't know. We got divorced a month ago. What? And why? We didn't fit together, and she found someone else. How strange. I haven't heard anything about this. The rest of the trip was spent in silence. All of this was a real shock to Clark. He had always seen Jack as a good family man, and now these details were coming to light. He drove her home and then went about his business. Honestly, Maggie was also surprised that no one at Jack's work knew about their divorce. Life after her husband left had gotten much worse. If before Maggie used to criticize Jake for doing nothing, now it was really noticeable that there was a lack of male hands in the house. First, the cupboard door broke. Then the lock started to fail, and then the kitchen tap broke. It seemed that all the misfortunes were following her. One day, while she was at work, Maggie decided that she and her daughter would go on vacation together. She didn't care that her daughter didn't have school holidays. If they didn't go now, they wouldn't for a long time. When she got home, she told Kirby the happy news. "Daughter, get ready. We are going to Mexico together." "Really? But I am at school." "Don't worry if you are not there for 2 weeks. I will talk to the teachers. They will send you the assignments by email. That would be great. After all, we have been dreaming of you resting together for a long time," said the daughter. "Well, let's go then. And it doesn't matter at all that Dad is not coming with us. Let him rest with his new girlfriend, and we will enjoy ourselves without him." Kirby was happy with the proposal. She saw how seriously her mum was taking it. After 2 weeks, they left for Mexico. After settling into the hotel, in a matter of minutes, they were already on the beach. "Mom, it's so beautiful here. Why didn't we come earlier?" "Probably because your father didn't have time. But don't worry, everything will be fine now." "Mom, I'm so grateful to you. This is the best vacation of my life." "Daughter, it will always be like this. We won't depend on anyone. We'll do what we really like." Kirby was excited, but her mum's words gave her hope that everything would be fine. The vacation was the most anticipated in 5 years. At sea, Mackie met an interesting man named Billy. He was also from her town, and they spent a lot of time together. No, it wasn't a resort romance, they just enjoyed being together. They exchanged numbers and promised to keep in touch when they returned to the city. They swam in the sea, went to different clubs, went on excursions for 2 weeks, and the vacation flew by. Kirby didn't really want to go back, but school and the cat that the neighbor looked after were waiting for her at home. They came back from the sea tanned, rested, and finally Mackie understood that it was time to start a new life. Mackie returned home happy and relaxed. Finally, she stopped thinking about her ex. It seems that her daughter had changed too. Now, she no longer waited for her father. Sometimes the woman still visited his page on social networks. She saw how happy he was with his new partner, but she didn't envy him. On the contrary, she felt sorry for him. The girl he was dating was 15 years younger than him. Mackie understood perfectly well that a couple of years would pass and he would find someone else. Probably, the girl was only interested in Jack because he was earning well now. After work, Mackie started dating Clark, who used to drive her home. Clark was 5 years older than Mackie and was divorced. Sometimes Mackie felt that Clark showed interest in her, but she did not seriously consider this man. She also knew from her ex-husband that her boss often changed partners. However, Mackie was not ready for new relationships in general. She still thought about her husband and did not understand when he started cheating on her. Over time, Kirby went to school and made her mother happy. Every weekend, the girl went to her grandparents' house. With them, Kirby felt much better. There was not so much supervision, and she could play with her friends as much as she wanted. Because of this, Maggie often argued with her mother. It was the weekend. Kirby had left with her parents yesterday when Maggie received a message from her friend who suggested going together with friends to the country house. Maggie thought for a bit and decided that she needed to get out of her depression, and maybe a trip to the country house would cheer her up a bit. She quickly packed her suitcase, and an hour later she was already sitting in the car. "Let's go relax," Molly asked her. "Yes, we're going. Who else will be there?" "Well, there are a couple of people from my work, some from my husband's work, and our mutual friends." Maggie knew that the weekend at the country house would be memorable. When they arrived, she was surprised to see Clark. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "Austin invited me here." Austin was Mally's husband, and now Maggie understood that he was Clark's friend. Maybe it's fate, Clark smiled. I'm not sure. In the evening, they grilled meat and chatted. Maggie talked a lot with Clark and felt that he was starting to like him too. However, she didn't miss the opportunity to ask about her ex-husband. How is Jake? Is he doing his job well? He seems to be, but sometimes he's not. To be honest, I've been thinking about removing him from that position. His appointment was too early. He's not quite ready yet. Music started playing in Maggie's heart. She fervently wished that Jack's life would be ruined. That the girl he's with now would finally understand that without money, he's just another man growing old. Maggie wasn't sure what exactly she was expecting. Maybe she was hoping that as soon as that girl left him, he'd come home on his knees. And maybe she'd forgive him too. The weekend at the country house passed without realizing it. And so, on Sunday evening, they returned to the city. Maggie went to her parents' house to pick up her daughter. She didn't visit them often because every time she did, she had to listen to a long lecture from her mother on how she shouldn't live. She knocked on the door, and Daphne opened it. "Daughter, how nice to see you here." "Hello, Mom." Maggie kissed her mother and entered the apartment. "Where is my daughter? Did she do her homework?" "Yes, she did. She's watching TV." Magia entered the large living room and found her daughter watching cartoons. "Daughter, get ready. We're going home." "But Mom, I wanted to stay a little longer with Grandma." "You can stay next weekend." With a disgruntled look on her face, the girl got up and went to pack her backpack. She knew that she would be bored when she returned home. Daphne made tea and sat her daughter down at the table. She was always interested in what was going on in her daughter's life, although Maggie didn't like to talk about it much. "Daughter, tell me, how are you doing in love?" "Mum, I don't have a love life. I don't think about it." "That's a mistake. I've heard that Jake is even thinking about getting married." Aki instantly blushed. She didn't expect her ex-husband to go that far. "How do you know that?" she asked. "Well, I'm talking to your mother-in-law. I guess that's how it should be. I can only wish her happiness." "Maggie, be honest, do you still love Jake?" "No, Mom. Seriously, it's personal and I don't want to talk about it." Taking sips of tea, Maggie quickly got ready to go home. She couldn't believe that her husband was planning to get married again, and to that woman on top of that. Back at home, Maggie plopped down on the bed, tears quickly streaming from her eyes. She knew it was the end. The next day, when she returned from work, she found a wedding invitation in her mailbox. Her ex-husband had inexplicably invited her to his wedding with the young woman. She couldn't believe it, and that night, she discussed on the phone with her friend what to do about it. Has he gone mad, or what? Invite you to his wedding? Well, what if I just don't go? No, please. Then he'll think you're jealous and you don't want to see him get married again. But I really don't want to see him, Maggie said. Then you need to find a date for one night and go with him. You need to make Jack regret inviting you to his wedding. Where am I going to find someone willing to do this? Well, don't you know anyone? Maggie thought for a moment, but was interrupted by her friend's shouts on the phone. I know who you can go to. Remember you talked to Clark a little at the cottage. He could accompany you. No, are you crazy? He's my ex-husband's boss. I'm afraid Jack just won't understand. We don't need to do that. Let him know that you're not hurting because of the divorce and that other men like you. I don't know. I don't think he'll believe it. You'll see. Everything will work out. We also need to buy the most beautiful dress for you, so that you really mind having lost what you had. How do you imagine this is going to work? That I propose to Clark that he accompany me to my ex-husband's wedding? It's easy. I'm telling you, he'll definitely accept. Do you think I didn't notice how they look at each other? Magia blushed. Her friend's words struck her as comical. The next day, gathering her courage, Mackie finally called Clark. She suggested they meet at a cafe to talk. Clark was happy to accept, and that very evening, they were sitting together at a table by the window. "Clark, I honestly don't know how to ask you, but you're the only man who could possibly agree to this." Clark looked at her, not understanding what exactly he wanted from her. "You see, Jack is getting married soon, and he invited me, but I don't have anyone to go with. Do you want me to go with you?" "Well, if you don't mind, I would really appreciate it." "Well, why not?" Maggie couldn't believe what she was hearing, but she didn't even have to insist much for him to agree to go to that wedding. It seemed as if he knew from the beginning that she would invite him. There were 2 weeks left until the wedding. During these 2 weeks, Maggie decided to dedicate herself to finding the perfect dress for that very important day. One weekend, she and Marley went shopping in the stores. They visited many places, but they didn't find the right dress for the occasion. "So, what am I going to wear to the wedding now?" Maggie asked hopefully. "You know, I was thinking we should go to a bridal shop. They often have evening dresses too." By the way, I hadn't thought of it that way. It was precisely at the wedding boutique that they were able to acquire that stunning dress. Maggie couldn't take her eyes off herself in the mirror. She was sure that no one would wear a better dress at this wedding. Finally, the long-awaited day arrived, for which Maggie had been preparing for weeks. Today, she got up early. She wanted to look spectacular to attract her ex-husband's attention. At 9 o'clock, a makeup artist came to her house and did her makeup and hair. Maggie looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized herself. Then, after putting on her dress and talking to Clark on the phone, she went out into the street. By that time, he was already waiting for her near the entrance. "Maggie, you look simply beautiful," Clark observed. "Thank you. Shall we go then?" We stopped by the flowers and congratulated the bride and groom. "Let's go." Clark opened the door for Maggie and she sat carefully in the car. Then they went to a flower shop where they bought a magnificent bouquet. Maggie was nervous. It was very important to her that everything was perfectly planned and that her ex-husband could not find any faults. And so, they arrived at the registry office. Jacques was speechless when he saw them. He rushed towards the couple to greet them and ask how they had arrived together. Jacques kept looking at Maggie. She was as beautiful as ever. He looked at her carefully from head to toe. He did not understand why he had not noticed her beauty before. It turns out Magie can still attract prosperous men like her boss. "Good day. How did they get here together? Did they meet at the entrance from afar?" "We're dating," Maggie said without thinking. "Really? But how did that happen?" Jacques suddenly turned red. "Too many questions. If you haven't forgotten, you have a wedding. Your fiancé is watching you with hawk eyes," his ex-wife observed. Jacques couldn't understand how his boss was dating his ex-wife. He didn't understand what Clark could find in Maggie, because she had a nasty character. Well, at least that's what it had always seemed like to him. Throughout the celebration, Clark couldn't take his eyes off the happy couple who were constantly smiling at each other and whispering to each other. "Maggie, I think we make a good couple together," Clark laughed. "Maybe so, but I don't think we would have really had a good relationship in real life." These words hurt Clark, but he didn't show any signs of it. He decided to play his part to the end. However, after the wedding, Maggie called a taxi and left, while Clark drove home in his car. Alone at home, Maggie realized that she forgot to thank Clark. She called him and thanked him very much for his help. "You're welcome. If you need any more help in the future, don't hesitate to call me." Clark's voice sounded very sad, and Maggie didn't even understand that she had hurt him at the wedding. "Is something wrong? It seems like you're talking to me reluctantly." "No, it's okay. I just thought we could have had something together for real. You made it clear at the wedding that we couldn't even be together." "Oh, is that what you're talking about? I didn't know it was important to you." "No. Forget it. Clark hung up and Maggie went to sleep. They didn't see each other again after that day, but soon Maggie realized that she was starting to miss him. She missed the company they used to have. She missed the night walks and the phone conversations. However, she didn't feel brave enough to call him. It was her mother who told Maggie that Clark fired Jake from his job because he wasn't performing. Now Jack was having problems in his family. His young wife started going out. Maggie didn't know whether to be happy or sad. It seemed that if her husband came back, she might even forgive him. However, things didn't go as she expected. One night, Jack really showed up with his daughter. He just wanted to see his daughter. Maggie was very surprised by his wish. "You're quite strange. You've been away for so long and now you're suddenly back. You know, I was thinking, maybe I was hasty. We could save our family." At some point, these were the words Maggie wanted to hear, but now, listening to Jack, she thought of Clark. "Hey, if you've come, can you stay with our daughter for a while? I urgently need to sit down on some important matter." Jack was perplexed. He didn't understand what his ex-wife wanted. Well, if it's really important, of course. Maggie quickly put on her jacket, took a cab, and went to see Clark. All the way there, she was thinking about how Clark might not let her in, since he had clearly told her that he didn't need her. She was really afraid of being rejected. She knocked on his door for a long time, and when he opened it, she pounced on him and kissed him. "Clark, forgive me. I've been thinking a lot, and I've realized that you were right. We really were a good match. Please give me another chance." Honestly, Clark was in shock at what was happening. He looked at her intently and didn't know what to say. "I think you still love Jake." I thought so too, but looking at him, I realized that everything is over. I want a new relationship. I want to be happy with you. You know, you taught me to forgive. You taught me to be strong when my strength runs out. I never thought I could love you. But these days without talking to you have been agonizingly long. I think I love you. I really miss you. It's so gratifying to hear that. You have no idea. At home, Jack is with our daughter, but I don't understand why he came. He told me that he had been hasty and that everything could still be saved. I used to expect to hear those words, but now I understand that they are not necessary for me. They stood for a long time in the hallway, hugging each other, kissing, hugging. Then they went back home together to let Jack go. Jack was completely in shock. He had seen his boss again. "What are you doing here?" "My relations with my wife are starting to improve." "I think you are confused. With your ex-wife, your wife is waiting for you at home. So go away. We are not going to keep you any longer." "What do you mean they are not going to keep me?" "I have come to see my daughter. Don't think badly, we're not kicking you out. Just, if you have somewhere to go, you can go." Jack was furious. Gathering all his strength, he slammed the door hard and left. There was no point in staying here. It bothered him to see his ex-wife and boss so happy. He thought that after the divorce with Maggie, he would never find anyone else and would be unhappy all his life. But things turned out very differently, and now Jack realized that he had been wrong. A year later, Clark and Maggie got married and are now expecting their second child. Clark has been raising Kirby as his own, and honestly, Maggie has never doubted his choice. She remembers perfectly what her life was like with Jack and wonders where his mind was at that time. She is grateful to Jack for giving her her daughter, but there is nothing else to thank him for. Recently, Jack got divorced. His young wife went to another country with her mistress and left him. They say that Jack started clinging to the bottle. He left Clark's company a while ago. He worked somewhere else for a while, but it only lasted a few months. Jack's life has been going downhill, and if he doesn't stop himself, it could end very badly. However, it seems that Jack doesn't realize this, as he doesn't even try to change a bit. He doesn't maintain a relationship with his daughter, doesn't attend her birthdays, doesn't even call, And honestly, Kirby doesn't care. For her, her father is Clark, who does everything to make her happy. Today, waking up in the morning, Mackie went to prepare breakfast for the family. He was already on leave, and his only task was to feed his family well. Soon, Clark came out. He kissed his wife and caressed her belly. Then Kirby arrived. They sat together at the big table and began to discuss how they would spend the weekend. Well, I think we should go to the country house. Mom needs some fresh air, but I don't want to. I want to go out with my friends. Daughter, you're an adult, but you need to understand that family is much more important, Clark pointed out. Dad, I understand everything, but you understand me too. Okay, enough arguing. I'm going to give birth soon, and you're here arguing. Don't stress me out, Maggie said. The woman stood up from her chair and held her belly. Well, it seems I know what I'm going to do this weekend, she said through clenched teeth. And what is it? Call an ambulance. I'm giving birth, Maggie shouted.